Okay, if I were to describe this episode of Divorced Sisters, I would call it the wind up. And then, what? No. Actually, I think the first two episodes were the wind up. Episode 3 was the pitch. And episode 4 is going to be the impact because based off the cliffhanger of Naomi popping up to the fundraiser, and you have Franklin and his new wife, Lindsay, I believe it's Lindsay, sitting at the same table as the rest of the girls and their husbands or partners or whatever. Holy crap. So I'm going to give this episode, it might seem strange, I'm giving it an 8. I believe episode 1, I gave it like a 7. Then episode 2, I gave it a 10. Episode 8, episode 3, Hushed Tones, I'm giving it a solid 8 out of 10. Something tells me this upcoming episode is going to be the wildest thing. Because like Tyler said, the first couple episodes will be the setup. And once things start rolling, it starts rolling. Now, there are a lot of questions to be asked after watching this episode, about Anika, whether or not she's actually William's daughter. I think the one line of dialogue from Rashida probably had a double meaning. Were you sipping on my water? And Frank and Jeff's assistant / boy, it had you wondering, because I believe in episode 1, when Tiffany and Bridget were getting their nails done, and I believe wasn't it Tiffany that said Naomi thinks that Jeff might be, and she didn't finish the statement, but you can kind of make an assumption there. And then in this episode, we find out some things that give off vibes of Donald from the Oval. We haven't had sex in a long time. And if you remember in the Oval, very similar storyline between Donald and Lily. And what was Donald and his right-hand man Kyle doing for quite some time in the show? Exactly. So, without further ado, let's get into this episode because it was a doozy. Make sure you take a moment to like and subscribe. Follow me on social media. Links are in the description below. This is a wild one, folks. Hit that bell notification and select all. That way you don't miss out whenever I post content on the channel. And let's get into it. So, the episode kicks off with a confrontation of sorts in the living room. William is putting Anika back in bed, so it's just Geneva and Javon downstairs. And he's like, okay, look, don't play me. I'm smart. I'm doing the math in my head. How old is Anika compared to when we were messing around with behind our spouses' backs and we wanted to start a family together? What's going on? And Geneva is just dumbfounded by it all because Javon left his wife for Geneva and he came back to her, for her, because he's expecting her to do the same thing to William. It's like, we agreed that we would both leave our spouses to be together, and you were supposed to be my wife, and we were supposed to have kids together and everything. And can you imagine? This is just insane. I mean, this isn't something that just happened over the course of the past few weeks. This is an affair that happened over half a decade ago. And can you imagine where, your life is just going forward, and then this person that you messed around with tells you, hey, not only did I come back, but I'm moving back into town. I've moved back into town, and I recently divorced my spouse. So let's pick up where we left off. Not even considering that, hey, you know what? The person I messed around with might be in a completely different mind space and condition in their marriage compared to when we were first messing around. Because even though Geneva tries to convince Javon that, hey, it's not like it was back then and this, that, and the third, you can just tell that that's a lie. And like Javon called her out for, I bet me interacting with you at the office and in your home right now has been more excitement for you than it has been in your marriage for the past 5 or 6 years. Wow. So he's like, fine, do you want me to leave? What are you going to tell William? It's like, well, I'll just come up with some cover story. Well, fine. You know what? I will leave right now if you want me to leave. Say it. And she can. So they end up on their way to the fundraiser. So, man, this episode started out with a doozy. I don't think it had as strong an opening as episode 2, where Rashida checked that girl for lying about messing around with her husband. But this was still a solid opening because of what happens later in the episode. And speaking of Rashida, and please forgive me if I mess up the names. Rashida, Geneva just sound too similar to me anyway. So sometimes I will confuse them. I will correct myself, but don't mind me if I stumble over my words here. So Jeff and Rashida are driving to the event, and they're pretty much picking up where they left off in terms of their argument at the house, where, you know, Jeff is really confused about Rashida's insecurities. And Rashida claps back by saying, every time I'm trying to talk to you, not argue, talk about some issues so we can work through them, because that's what a committed couple is supposed to do. You always deflect. You always throw something back at me when I bring up something that I feel like is coming from your end. And then that leads into discussion of how they haven't had sex in a while. Jeff really isn't there for the family, even though he's a husband and a father. But he's like, well, that's my calling, you know, but that doesn't mean you neglect your responsibilities at home. What good is it to, you know, help fix and solve all the issues of the flock if your own house isn't in order? That's very telling. And it's like, look, you know, I love you. I do. But it just feels like an obligation when you think about it. It's like they even go so far as to mention how we're going to go to this fundraiser and act normal. And it turns out that they don't even drive to the events together anymore. They only, you know, are in the same vehicle right now for the sake of appearances. And Jeff mentions that one of the reasons why we always arrive to church and whatnot separately is because you nag too much. And then, you know, he kind of throws the lifestyle that she has, or that they have, in her face. Like, you know how many women would love to be in your shoes? Come on, like, you're mad, you're in your feelings, but the moment we go to the event, we get out the car and all eyes are on us, on you, you forget all about it. Well, you forget that it was my grandfather's dowry that paid for the church. I ain't gonna lie. That was a mic drop moment. It's like, I mean, Jeff throwing it in her face like, oh, you love this lifestyle. Well, let's not forget whose grandfather paid for that church. Boom. So it's all quiet from that point on their way to the event. So we go over to Naomi's house. I ain't gonna lie. I might not like her demeanor, but dang it, if Naomi did not look good. And the background music as well. It was hitting when she was coming out of the back room, and her glam team is, you know, like excited to see her. Like, look, with as good as you look and the mood you're in right now, forget about Franklin, forget about the drama. You just go to this event and you slay, have a good time. However, the good times come to an end when comes on the door, because it is the police. They would like to have Naomi come outside, and when she refuses, that's when Franklin's lawyer comes through the door, and they need to search the place. So here's what we learned. Well, first of all, I believe Price is Franklin's last name, Franklin Price. And essentially, there were a number of things that Naomi was supposed to turn over post-divorce, according to the judge. Geneva confirms this later on. Things such as cars, paintings, jewelry, furs. Pretty much everything Franklin bought for Naomi is no longer her property. But, you know, she didn't want to give them back. And, well, they came and took it all. It got pretty intense where, you know, Naomi was unwilling to do whatever was asked of her, to the point where the lawyer said the cops would forcibly remove the jewelry from her body if she didn't, you know, pretty much agree to do it. She even went so far as to take the earrings out and toss them in the bushes, but they're like, we got metal detectors. That was pretty messed up. And the worst part is they took all the luxurious fancy cars and left her with a, you know, old beat up one. And it's like, what? So they go inside to like crack the safe and just get everything. And from there, she gets in her car and just drives off. And one of her friends and, you know, glam team members calls up Geneva, but as she and Will and Javon are on their way to the event, she pretty much ignores the call, but she gets a text message, and that's when she's like, hang on, I got to make this call. And then that's when she finds out about the whole situation and says, look, I told Naomi she had to get that stuff back. So that pretty much killed her mood, hence why she drove off into the night. And as they're driving, Will is telling Javon about Tiffany. And it's funny because Geneva's getting kind of uncomfortable about it because obviously she knows what's going on between her and Javon. Will doesn't, allegedly. And that's a interesting talking point that some people online have made, that do you think William is aware of Javon and Geneva's affair? And that's why he's kind of, playing in her face about it. But I don't know. But in any case, we go over to the fundraiser event, the venue, and Bridget is stressed out. She's trying to update seating arrangements. Like, hey, we don't want any arguments going on. So can we have this person sitting at this table, this person at that table? And man, this is wild. So Will actually makes a quick call to Bridget to see if she can get Javon and Tiffany to sit together at the table. And her boyfriend, Vaughn, Tyler could have come up with some better names here because too many of these people have similar names. Javon, but we got Vaughn. We later find out he's 29, about to turn 30 in a few days, a few months. But in any case, Vaughn shows up in his waiter outfit, and one of Bridget's assistants at the church assumes he's one of the waiter. Bro, this is like wearing a red shirt to Target. It wouldn't be something abnormal for someone to assume you work there. But in any case, he just shows his whole ass, and Vaughn is essentially that boyfriend you can't take anywhere, especially to a mature adult event, because he don't know how to act. So he pretty much just shows his behind trying to get some liquor up in there at a church function. So Jeff and the First Lady arrive, followed by Rashida. Well, actually, Rashida and Tiffany chatted up a bit before Geneva and Bridget as well, and they're all just, talking about what's about to go down. Like, is everything okay? What's wrong? And then Naomi, they call her. She's at the liquor store, drunk as a skunk, and she's upset. It's like, no, I'm going to show up. And they're like, how about this? How about this? Why don't we meet up after the event? And she's like, yeah, it's like my hair, my dress is ruined. I'm just, after everything that went down, yeah, it's probably best I go home. And look, girl, we will come over as soon as the event is over. So they're like, okay, that's one disaster averted. Oh, if they only knew. Now, from there, we got Pastor Jeff and his assistant, the assistant of Justice Ty and everything. No big deal. You assume, oh, yeah, that's his, his right-hand man. You want to make sure the pastor looking straight for, going up on stage and whatnot. So then, I didn't catch his name, but the guy who was on the phone, was it Calvin, right? Calvin, I think was his name. He was on the phone with Bridget in the last episode, upset that he gave Vaughn a job and he quit on the first day. And he's like, Pastor, you got to pray for me. It's like, this kid, your employee Bridget, it's like, I hired a boyfriend because she asked me to, and it just did not work out at all. And lo and behold, here come Vaughn asking the pastors, hey, nice to meet you, man. Hey, where to look at? Like, this is a church event, son. Because him and Calvin kind of get into it for a minute. It's like, you don't see me standing here? Man, forget you and that job. It's like, as soon as I quit, I was done. And, Jeff steps in before, a fight breaks out. It's like, hey, this is a church event, son. It's like, there is no liquor here. But didn't Jesus turn water into wine? I'm thinking like, well, when you think about it from that logic, but no, it's just, come on, man. Just go somewhere and sit down. And he just walks off screaming for Bridget. And then from there, you got William and Javon going up and introducing themselves. It's like, okay, so everybody, the manager's standing there. And then the women show up, and Will is laying it on thick. He's really trying to hook up Javon and Tiffany. So they all sit down at the table, and Jeff and Rashida go up on the stage, Jeff to make opening remarks and Rashida to give a prayer. And then, it's almost low key like she was calling out her girls in the prayer about just help us the way you know we need to be helped, and heal us the way you know we need to be healed, and this, that, and the third. And it's just like, Now that leads to Vaughn yet again making an ass out of himself because he's upset that he has to sit towards the back of the room, but Rashida, in order to keep the peace, tells him, oh, just please have a seat. And Vaughn, again, it's just showing it. It's like, bro, I get that. Well, then again, there are men and women who are in their late 20s, early 30s, and they act like just man. Well, let's just focus on a man child. It's like, bro, you don't take this guy anywhere. You don't take this guy anywhere. And in the midst of Tiffany and Javon, hitting it off, and it's kind of like, is Javon actually feeling Tiffany, or is he putting on a bit of a show to make Geneva uncomfortable, which goes in line with if William is aware of the affair. That wasn't meant to rhyme, but it just happened to do it. If he isn't aware of the affair, is he purposefully putting on an act in order to make Geneva uncomfortable? So she gets up to go to the restroom, and Rashida goes to follow her, and Will's like, hey, can you figure out what's wrong with her? It's like, she's acting so strange tonight. So as they go to the restroom, Geneva reveals that, hey, he was at my house earlier because William invited him here. And on top of that, I didn't tell you this, he came over to my office earlier today, and then he asked if Anika is his daughter, and Rashida's face was like, well, could it be? I don't know. I mean, we had sex one time, and I was on IVF, and we didn't use protection. And it's like, well, like the saying goes, all it takes is one time. So in the midst of Rashida trying to get, Geneva to calm down, Tiffany comes to the restroom, and man, here's where it gets worse for Geneva. Tiffany actually likes Javon. They're hitting it off pretty well. And on top of that, she is saying that she's ready to start dating again, which is a fun callback to episode 1, where Geneva was telling, girl, we need to get you back on the dating market. Like, all you do is work to avoid dating. And the knife in the heart to Geneva to have her girl, who she was pushing to date, end up hitting it off with the man she had an affair with, who just came back into town after divorcing his wife to get back together with Geneva, who is scared that she might have had his baby. It's just a lot going on. It really is. And it's crazy to think that so far, out of all of the women, Tiffany seems to be the one who is going through the least drama. I mean, her drama was 3 years ago after her husband, whatever he did. I don't believe it's been confirmed yet what Tiffany's ex-husband did to her. I think it was cheating, but in episode 2, her and Naomi talked, and it was brought up that what Tiffany's ex-husband did was not as bad as Franklin. Cheating with that young 25-year-old white chick, got her pregnant, and then told Naomi, hey, I'm leaving you. Naomi got a $37 million divorce settlement. Tiffany has to pay her ex-husband alimony. So, yikes. But aside from that, at least she doesn't have a baby with someone she cheated on her husband with, nor is she dealing with marital problems right now because she's divorced. Her big thing is just getting her life back together after the divorce, and Javon might be that dude. But it could be a long game thing where Javon might just start dating Tiffany because, I'm divorced. My old mistress doesn't want me, so I'll just hook up with her friend. And I'm going to constantly be in her presence because that's one of her best friends. And yikes. But then in the long run, it's like, what if Geneva does agree to get with Javon? What's that going to do with Tiffany? Because that's going to break her heart and then probably ruin their friendship. So there's a lot of things at stake right now. But we go over to the table, and Will is yet again talking. William. See, I'll say like Jeff instead of Jefferson. Or wait, is it Pastor Jeffrey or Jefferson? Correct. I'm just going to say Jeff. And then William. So Will is like, oh, there you go, Vaughn, come on. I mean, Javon, yeah, you like her, don't you? You like her. And it's funny because, he asked for the pastor to back him up. Yeah, I can see it now. I can see it. And across the room, Bridget tells Vaughn to go home because, like, look, you just cannot be taken anywhere. It's like, well, where am I supposed to go? Fine, I'll take your car. How am I supposed to get home? Exactly. So Vaughn just gets mad and leaves. And Franklin and his new wife show up, and Bridget's like, oh my goodness. So after the ladies leave the restroom and go back to the table, that leads to the assistant sitting in Rashida's chair. And she's like, wait, were you drinking on my water? Oh, no, ma'am. And I'm thinking again, is that supposed to have a double meaning? Somebody was thirsty sipping on Rashida's water and she ain't talking about the glass. Then Franklin and Lindsay sit at the table and she asks about the dragon lady. And then Tiffany and Rashida confront her. Who you calling dragon lady? Oh, we're talking about Naomi? Oh, yeah, we're her friends. So they sit down and, you know, she's like, oh, you like what you see? 10-carat earrings. Yeah, they look better with somebody with a bit more color. Excuse me? Yeah, you know, melanin makes it pop. And then Frank's like, don't pay him no mind. So then from there, that's when Naomi shows up. And that's the end of the episode. So holy crap. Yeah, this was a good setup. I can't wait to see what happens on this upcoming episode 4. Yeah, like I said, this was one of those episodes that answers some questions, gives us a bit more character motivation, and has things set up for an epic payoff in the near future. But with that being said, that was Divorce Sisters episode 3, Hush Tones. Like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.